there's nothing.
I know that's been one of
Come on,
Dick's pushes, is trying to get subdivisions to put easements, or put connections from subdivisions into the rail trail. We're trying to do that with Brittenell Estates, one of the cul-de-sacs at the back that goes right up to the easement, to put a little pass so they can get to it.
We have one over on Watson has one, and that's been there for
Hello.
years, I guess, but
Are you on Watson?
I'm off one.
Oh, I'm on Watson.
Oh, I'm on Lord.
Colleen.
I'm Michelle, nice to meet you.
Gonna go that way? Okay.
I don't want to stand.
Yes. Oh, same with us.
Either way, I'm on the corner, so I'll sit over here.
Three, so we're on the second line on the left.
See the one's kind of tucked back?
No.
Oh, no, I'm thinking
I'll
of
take
Brittany,
that.
the one, that's the
Yeah.
touchback one.
Yep, we're just right there, the brown one. Where are you?
No, I think this
16
is, I think
Watson.
this is getting all the names. phone
Like we're
numbers, and all that
we're in
stuff.
between the Bills, Billy, Kathy, and Bill,
Maybe the
and Sue.
setup will work.
And we're opposite,
Let me see if Rich is upstairs tutoring.
Jim and Sheila.
Don't know them.
Everyone's retired in our like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
triangulation, and it's amazing. Love
So
these.
No,
Chris,
I've
don't
only been
let
here a couple
that,
years, so,
Where'd you come from?
Winokur guy
we
slough
came
off
from
at work.
Florida, but we're from Worcester.
Good dude.
I know
Well,
it
yeah,
is.
we had been to
I've been
Florida,
hunting
we've
with
been
him
to
for
Texas,
years.
we've
Oh,
been
yeah?
to Hawaii,
Yeah,
so.
he,
He
his wife
is.
and my wife are real good friends, so.
Yeah.
We moved
Once
around
I
a lot.
met him, and then that
And where did you
Jordan
come from?
kid,
I'm from Manhattan originally.
Oh,
and
Watch
then
out for
I was
him.
in
He's a hard
Shrewsbury for
worker,
a
I'll give you
while.
that.
Yeah, no, Sonny's a great kid.
Okay,
Yeah.
Finally settled here.
yeah.
Him and
Randy, I said, let him just
Tim
be.
Putnam works
Oh,
too.
another one, yeah.
Yeah, so Dave's kids are great. He's an animal too. He's a very good dude.
That was my favorite old man, and I'm having a brain death with memory with you guys.
Bart,
Art, yes.
he's got the flu right now. He's been down out all week. Yeah.
I know he had the
He's-
back problems and everything else.
He's a tough old man. He's a good dude.
He was my guy that I wanted, only guy I wanted working on my rig stations.
He's he's awesome.
Focal point of the Zoom.
That's right. All right, we got one more. And it is 6:02. We will call this meeting to order. This is a little unusual. I'm the town administrator. I am not a member of this committee, but one of our first orders of business will be to elect a chair. But before we do that, I just want to say congratulations and thank you for volunteering to be on this very important committee, the Town Charter Committee. For those who don't know what a town charter is, well, you'll learn in a little bit from our support staff here from the Collins Center. But I think this is the beginning of a very important process, so I just want to thank you for your volunteering and commitment to this effort. I passed around a committee charter if you haven't had a chance to sign it yet. What I'll do is I'll take this back to the office tomorrow and send it out to the group as a whole, just so you have everyone's names and contact information, but it's also primarily for who will be the chair to be able to reach out to each of the members. Before we elect a chair, if we could just go around the room and introduce ourselves. We'll start here.
Hi, I'm Leah Whiteman. I am the select board member representation. I've lived in town for 14 years now, I think. So I've been on the select board for 7 years. So I'm excited to have the town charter committee finally moving forward. It's been an agenda item, I think, in the back of my mind since I joined the board, and in talking with all the town administrators and consultants and everything, that the town charter is really an important piece of the town governance structure. So I'm excited to get going.
I'm Rich Lopez. My family and I have been living here in Rutland for almost 3 years. I serve, in addition to this committee, I serve on the Library Board of Trustees, and I've really enjoyed just connecting with folks in town and figuring out ways we can make our town better and brighter for the future. So that's me.
I'm Barbara McManus. I've lived in Rutland for 8 years, and this is my first time on anything involved with the town of Rutland. So.
Chris Senical, live on Glenwood Ave, been in town about, start to forget, about 28 years. Been on different boards, the ZBA, I'm president on the ZBA, been on that for about 20 years. I was on the RDIC, I'm on the HPD Review Board, which reviews the projects up at the Rutland Heights property. And I'd just like to give back and help out to the town, so I'm happy to be a part of this and look forward to working with everybody.
I'm Sandra Thomas, born and raised in Rutland. I joined the 300th committee, never done anything for town before till that, because that just sounded like a lot of fun. The 250th, everybody had fun. The 275th, we were in the parade, me and my friends, we were just kids. But, so I thought that would be fun, and then that rolled into the events committee, which is also fun, and it's just nice to meet all the new folks in town. Like, I can't get over how many new people there are in town. It's just really neat, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to, I don't know, bring some of the old and new and just mush it all together. And yeah, I'm interested to work on a town charter.
I am Michelle Campbell. I've been in town also almost 3 years. I came right at the 300th. And this is my first time serving on a board here in town, and I'm really excited to get going with the process.
Hi, I'm Talene Orlando. I've been in Rutland for about 5 years. I teach third grade in town, and it's my first endeavor into Rutland governance.
I'm Tim Norwald. I'm the other representative from the planning board. I've been in town 25 years, and like Chris, I serve on the RDIC with that group, and just been involved in a lot of stuff through town, and I think to Leah's point, this charter will be a good point to get government organized.
Ryan Ledger, I've been here for 10 years-ish. My wife's on the select board. I think this interested me because I like rules, I like seeing rules enforced, so that would be an interesting process and put my name in the hat. So.
Thank you again. Welcome, everyone. We'll introduce our guests soon, just after we go through the election of the committee officers. So we're going to start first by electing the committee chair. Some essential basic responsibilities of the committee chair is responsible for running or chairing the meetings. You could think of it as almost like the president of a town council, if you will, or chair of any other board or committee. Other responsibilities are making sure that agendas are posted in a timely manner, and there's a process to follow for that. For anyone who has been involved in some other board and committee assignments, posting the agenda is one of the hardest things to do sometimes, especially in Massachusetts, because we have some interesting timing regulations for that. But that's something that you can work with the town clerk's office and our office to make sure that is successful. The chair is essentially the leader of the committee, making sure that discussion is relevant to the topics, and that the meeting is orderly. With that being said, the process that we're going to follow for this is, if anyone's interested in either volunteering for the chair position or nominating another individual for the position, this is kind of, the floor is open to have the discussion and make that consideration now.
Because I've worked with this lad a lot, I think Chris would make an excellent chairman for this this board. I know you're chairman of the HPDD and you're chairman up, but I think you'd be a good chairman for this board. A, from experience, and B, I've seen you in action, and I sure as heck like what I saw.
Thank you.
Your point, I share the same sentiment. I want to have a conversation, but I share the same sentiment. I think, Chris, I've been really impressed with, Chris, your leadership of the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I know you've had some contentious hearings, and I think that you are a very level-headed chair, and you're able to manage the public engagement piece, which I think is huge for this committee, as well as the creating space for everyone to be heard and respected. So I really appreciate that, and I would support you as being
I need
chair.
a discount on my next job.
Just kidding. Well, thank you. Does anybody else, I mean, I don't mind, I'm fine doing that, but I'm certainly, if anybody else has interest in doing it, yeah, by all means, don't wanna steal anybody's, thunder here or anything like that, but
So do you want to consider, Tim, you made the motion, do you want to make the second?
Yep, if
I would just like to ask one thing though.
Sure.
Tamika, on the other two boards, she helps me tremendously putting those, agendas in on the right time. with my busy schedule, I just need some help with that, Austin. To what level, we can work that out, how much, but it's nice being able to go to her and have her send out the meeting notices and things like that, and we work really good together. So if she could help me with doing some of that administrative things, I would be happy to do it.
Yeah, so I think, I'm definitely open to, I think, having our office assist with this committee. That's also something, we're gonna talk about the clerk position as well, that the clerk
Exactly.
position may be able to help
Absolutely.
with as well, so, but we can definitely talk, and you can talk with whoever's.
Sure.
your
Absolutely.
clerk. But, so you do accept the chair position?
I would, yes, as long as everybody else is, yeah.
So we're just gonna take a quick vote. Those in favor of electing Chris Senical as chair of the committee, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous, all right. Congratulations, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Next steps are electing a vice chair, and I'll let you kind of run this one. Vice chair, essentially everything I said about the chair, if Chris isn't here, you're in charge. And a clerk position, which a clerk of a committee is essentially, one, making sure that the meeting kind of follows open meeting law, responsibility of taking the minutes, and sounds like maybe Chris may want some help possibly for agendas, so consideration there. We will be here to help, whether it's for agendas or minutes. If you are unsure or need some assistance, as always, please reach out to me or my office. We can definitely assist with that. So, Chris, turn it over to you.
Thank you. Does anybody want to back the chair up? By all means,
Through the chair.
yes.
This is my suggestion, somebody that's new in town, I think it'd be a good position to learn from. I'm just giving from experience, so if somebody wants to do that, I think step up, you'll learn a lot. It's really not, you're only backing him up when he's got.
I can't be there, and I do promise you, if I can't make it, if something does come up, you'll get good notice from me. I try to communicate as best I can with anybody that works
You
with
do
me.
a great job.
And just keeping a little bit, and promise you, I'll try to never leave you hanging like that, because it's a pretty awful thing to do. Not that this is the end all be all here, but just so you know. But,
I'd like to nominate my friend Tal.
That's giving you the look.
Tal is an amazing educator and person, and all the qualities I've seen in her in like different contexts, I think would bring strength to this committee, so.
I really appreciate that. I would gladly step in as your number two. As part of my job, I'm keen on the note taking and the agenda, doing and backing you up as needed, so.
I would support that. I love to see new involvement and fresh involvement, and anybody that's willing to kind of step in and learn the ropes, I'm all for. So I would fully support that as well.
I'll second it.
so that was a motion. We have it seconded.
I think Rich made the motion.
Oh, Rich, I'm
and
sorry. That's right. Rich made the
We can
first
give Tim
motion.
the second.
Yep, Tim seconded. All right. So all in favor of? I'm sorry.
Aye.
Okay, well, you're a shoo-in then. All right, all in favor, aye? Aye. Any nays? Hearing none, you're carried unanimous, thank you. All right.
And how do you pronounce your name? I'm sorry.
It's Talleen. That's
Talleen.
like Colleen with a T.
Oh, that's totally fine, thank you. And do you prefer Talleen or Tall or?
It doesn't, whatever people want to call me is fine.
Okay. Thank you, sorry.
Next up for the clerk position, is anybody dying to take meeting notes and do some administrative things? I'll just say this one thing, my opinion of it. Sometimes when I've been in that position having to take notes, it's awful hard to help contribute to the discussion because you're so busy. And this is not that large of a group of people, but still, nonetheless, I'm sure there'll be time when we're trying to listen to the group from the Collins group and trying to pull everything in and talk and whatnot. So just be careful that you've got that ability to listen, do multitask like that very well. I know I'm not good at it, so I would never want to be a clerk taking notes. I've done it a few times, but
Can I just
that
add
being
something
said-
there? So, if you don't mind, I think our intent is to also make sure that these meetings are recorded.
Yep.
To be able to help, the clerk and members of the committee and the public to access these meetings, because I agree with you. Even I am trying to catch up on taking the minutes tonight for you guys. But we will have all of these meetings recorded and posted online. So if you missed something, you can always go back and make sure you get the vote right.
Check the tape.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say through the chair, that the clerk, you've got this, which has got everything on it. So that's always
I have a quick question about this. So if we record them, Who's actually hosting right now? Are they the meeting here? Because you can just click the AI note-taking companion and it'll do it all for you. There's,
I turned it on to test it out tonight, just to see how it
okay,
how
I
it
was
goes.
gonna say,
You've never used it before here?
it'll almost completely eliminate the need for.
Yeah, yeah. There's a nearby town that does that, but
At my work, we use it. I don't know which version or tier of the service we use for it, but it's become quite effective.
We use it at work frequently, and it's not the Zoom version, but
Yeah.
it's spooky how
It is.
accurate it is. So I don't have a problem with doing it. I do it at work all the time anyway, but it's up to all of you.
So I would be comfortable if Ryan's volunteering for the role. I would be comfortable. I
heard that too.
Nominate, make a motion, and Ryan as the clerk.
Who's got it?
I'll second his nomination. It's my position, I would.
All right, so we have a first and a second. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Being the clerk? Aye. Any nays? Hearing none, unanimous. Welcome, thank you.
Thank you all for volunteering for those positions.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just on the next agenda item, before we begin, I just want to introduce
Please, yeah, please.
Anthony Wilson from the Collins Center. Just a little bit of background, so we, kind of why we're here tonight, we applied for our Community Compact Grant to establish or begin the process of establishing a town charter. We then contracted with Collins Center from UMass Boston. I'll let Anthony tell you a little bit about himself and the Collins Center. But Anthony and his team will be assisting us and this committee during this process. So just want to turn it over to you, Anthony.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen so I can see the presentation. Starting on the wrong slide. And sort of as I go through this, I just want to sort of start by saying this is meant to be an interactive presentation. We're going to be meeting a number of times for informational purposes, but feel free to raise your hand, stop me, throw a pencil at me or something if you want to ask a question. This is meant to be interactive, and I'm prepared to answer questions on most of this.
You're an attorney, huh?
That's correct. Yeah. Maybe I'm bad.
I'm just joking with you.
So today's presentation is going to be a little bit about me, a little bit about the Collins Center, but mostly about charters broadly in municipal government in Massachusetts, and then a little bit about what this committee, I guess, some expectations. Now, this is your committee. You guys are in charge of sort of structuring how you want to do this work, but I'm just sort of giving you some high-level ideas about sort of how we've seen it done in some areas you'll probably cover. So again, Anthony Wilson, a little bit about my background. I started in municipal government in the city of Springfield as a lawyer in the law department. I went on from there to be the city clerk in Springfield, and then I was the city clerk in Cambridge, Massachusetts for several years before coming over to the Collins Center at UMass Boston to lead the what we call the charter and organizational structure practice. There's about 10 of us in the practice, and we are doing projects all over the state, which I'll get into in 1 second. But that's sort of my background. Now, the Collins Center was created in 2008 by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It was placed inside the University of Massachusetts, and really the thought was municipalities, large and small, across the state are providing, just a plethora of services to residents, and it can be hard to do that and try to be ahead of the curve and try to do the next thing. So the Council was created to provide technical assistance on a number of areas, including IT, human resources, operations, data analytics, obviously charter and organizational structure, but all of these things that a certain municipality might not have in-house a competency in. We've worked with, at this point, this slide's a little bit old, we've worked with well over, it's probably 3/4 of the communities in Massachusetts at this point, from all sizes, large and small. Again, at this point, probably closer to 1,000 projects to date with Massachusetts municipalities. And just as an aside, we do some projects in Connecticut and New Hampshire. But primarily our focus is Massachusetts.
One question for you, Attorney. Do you do more than just charters with the Collins Center, or are you just strictly working with town charters personally yourself?
So my focus, I lead the charter and organizational team, but I've also done work on, we have a zoning and development practice where we help communities think about their zoning in terms of Obviously, there's dealing with the MBTA communities, there's, you know, we wanna prepare for the future, we wanna prepare for future development, how do we align our zoning with
So
that?
to meet the future needs, yeah.
Exactly, and I've also done some work in the IT practice. As a city clerk, there's a heavy IT component, so I've worked with communities and how do you integrate IT services or sort of elevate your technological use to be more efficient in town. But my primary focus, I'd say 90% of my portfolio is charter work, yeah. And so I'll just go through this slide very quickly, just so you get an idea of sort of the plethora of work that we do. We currently have several projects going now. I put just Somerville, Nantucket, Medford, Burlington, and Littleton. So again, that's a wide variety of different types of government, which we're gonna talk about in a second, as well as different sizes of communities. And each community is unique. You know, we're coming to you with a set of best practices as well as what's common around the Commonwealth. But you don't have to necessarily take everything. There's some sort of unique, you know, you're unique, and so you want to sort of reflect that uniqueness in your charter, because that will make the sort of, you don't want to make too many changes because you don't want to scare everyone away when you go to town meeting. So that's one thing that we try to keep sort of in the minds of the committee.
Good question. If this committee's got like MGL questions as we're going through this charter, is that something the Collins Group would help us with? Cause I'm trying to minimize the time we have to go to, like, if we've got questions from attorney, cause sometimes the turnaround's internal to us, then the town takes time, and I just wonder if that's something that you can not give us legal advice, but experience advice on.
Yeah, we don't provide legal advice, but we can provide, just what you're saying, experience advice. We understand how most of the laws that we're gonna talk about work or sort of impact at the local level, but we always advise, and usually it's at the end, once you've sort of got a document put together, to run it by the town council before it goes before town meeting. I'm assuming most of your articles go to town council for review. It would sort of be a similar process. But yeah, but don't take it as legal advice. I'm not.
No, I just was
No,
looking
just to
like.
give us an understanding.
Yeah,
right?
an understanding, yeah, Chris, that's what I was looking for, something like that.
As with most lawyers, there's an asterisk at the end.
I know. I've done enough depositions, I know.
That's what I'm even paying them.
So now we're gonna get into, now, some of this is really just to give you a broad understanding about what this field looks like, because it actually is much larger than people think, particularly in Massachusetts. Forms of government. So first I'm gonna start with, I just said that, you know, Rutland is its own snowflake and you want your charter to reflect that. Massachusetts in many ways is its own snowflake in the broader United States in terms of municipal government. This thing that you have called town meeting is unique to New England. They don't have this in other parts of the state, which leads to some unique complications perhaps for different, you know, for where we are. So one of the first things I'd like to point out from this slide is we throw around the terms town and city somewhat cavalierly when we talk about this topic. In Massachusetts, there are many communities which we would consider having the city form of government, but they're called a town. For example, the town of Franklin actually has what we would consider a city form of government. And so what is the distinction between a city and a town form of government? We generally consider a town any form of government that has some form of town meeting, whether it's representative or open town meeting, and any city community that has a council. Now, whether the executive is a mayor or a council manager, those distinctions exist, but anything with a council is a city. Communities aren't permitted to go to the city form of government unless you have a population of 12,000 or more residents. So you don't have the city form of government sort of on your menu of options, and that's under the state constitution. However, there are two flavors of town meeting. One is the open town meeting, in which all residents can go to the meeting. You are very familiar with that. And then there's representative town meeting, which is fairly uncommon in Massachusetts, but is open to communities with 6,000 or more. It can be somewhat complicated, particularly setting up, because when you set up the representative town meeting form of government, you divide your community into precincts. And again, for communities with smaller populations, it can be harder to reach. There's certain thresholds for how many people need to be in each precinct. And again, this is a lot, so feel free to stop me. I'm sort of going over this at a high level, just to give you a flavor of the different town forms of government. So for the purposes of this committee, and I don't know how much you want to get into different forms of government, but basically you're in one form, there's one other form available to you if you wanna consider it as we go through this process.
I have a question. For the representative town meeting form and the precincts, Rutland has a lot of development kind of happening now, but then also in the pipeline. How often do do the representative towns have to redistrict their precincts?
So that, as with other sort of, other communities, the redistricting would happen every 10 years with the census.
Okay.
And so that would happen on the same timeline, yes.
And a quick question, either for Leah or Austin, how many people are currently in town? Or you might know, or.
I put, first of all, my sloppy work, that should be your
Merrimack,
town,
we're
but
outta here.
when I looked it up, it was 9,422.
Oh,
but
okay,
you might
so
have
not
more
Merrimack.
up to date.
I think we're a little bit higher now.
Oh, okay, so we're about, so it says Merrimack.
It should say Rutland, and
That's okay,
totally
okay,
me.
so that's what you meant to say, okay.
I think we're just under 10,000. I think it's 9,700 is in my head, but I don't know
just
for sure.
That's what I thought, we were right around that,
Yeah.
okay.
Next slide. Again, this is just broadly informational, and this can be a little confusing, but it'll make sense once you think about it for a second. So most communities, just of the 351 communities, most of them are towns, are considered towns. But most of the population, again, because the cities are generally larger, most of the population of Massachusetts lives in the cities. And that's just a breakdown by just the number of communities in the different forms and then population in the other forms. Just to give you just some of the broad lay of the land. All right, so some of the charter bases, what are you going to be working on throughout this process? So what I have here are, again, charters can be unique. So not all of these things have to be in your charter, or you can have things in your charter that aren't on this list. But these are generally the sections or articles that we find in a charter. I'm gonna just go through them sort of briefly to sort of give you an idea about what's in there. So the preamble, I consider it like a statement of purpose. It's usually not very long, maybe a sentence or two. Incorporation and definitions, that's really more functional in terms of the document. You know, we are incorporated as a town, and here's the definitions of the terms used throughout the article. There's a few other things that might go in that section. The legislative branch is a big one that time is spent on. In Rutland, we'd be talking about your town meeting, and we'd be talking about sort of the processes around calling a town meeting, quorum, things of that nature. I've noticed looking through your bylaws that you have a pretty substantial bylaw defining town meeting, and that would be appropriate to put in the charter. And so it would go in a section there.
Will this also be the time that we review that and make changes? That we want to?
Correct. And these are in the order that you usually see them, but this doesn't necessarily have to be the order that the committee works on these topics. One of the other topics is the executive branch, so that is generally the select board and the town administrator. The school committee, Rutland has it's part of a regional school district. When that's the case, we changed the section, but there might be some things in there you want to put about. I didn't specifically look up if you're electing the members to the regional school district, so there might be some language there. Administrative organization actually tends to be more important than it may initially sound. That gives the power to the executive, some branch of the executive, to reorganize, abolish, or create departments, as needed, going through a certain process, as well as it might define certain administrative roles that rise to the level of being in the charter. They all don't rise to that level, but some of them you may want in the charter, like you definitely want your town administrator in the charter, obviously your select board. I often see the clerk I see the clerk in the town charter as well as the town council. Those are positions that are often defined in the charter. Financial procedures is one that is growing substantially in importance. That's talking about the adoption of the budget. When should it be started? The process of going to finance committee, that was often delineated in the finance section. And one of the things that we're really advocating for, this is actually coming from the consular to advocate for, is something in there about capital planning. We generally put a section in there about capital planning, that community should create a 5-year capital plan and review it yearly when it is looking at its budget. That's sort of a recommendation from us to communities based on some stuff that we've seen around local finances. Elections, I think that's sort of self-explanatory. Resident participation is another interesting one. So outside of electing officials, There could be often recall provisions go here, provisions about putting things on the ballot can go here, and other sort of unique provisions. General provisions is the sort of the catch-all. One of the big important things that go in the general provisions section is around the periodic review of the charter and the ordinances. So we recommend a 10-year review of the charter, so it's not just a static document that you guys will create and be finished with. It's something the community should look at we recommend every 10 years, with the first review happening 5 years after the first adoption. And then transition.
Sorry to interrupt you. So, and that would be basically this all over again?
Correct, yeah, and don't worry about interrupting me, you shouldn't interrupt. And then the transition provisions. Depending on what decisions are made in the previous sections, there may need to be some transition from the current operations to how things will operate under the new charter. And so we will look at that and we would sort of pull those things out and say, here's how we want that transition to happen. Including, one of the big things that go here is if you pass some special acts that are no longer gonna be used or that the charter's gonna take over, then you'd say, this is now sort of taking the place of those special acts, and we'd sort of list them and delineate them. And we really help you, we do that research of sort of looking through your past special acts and sort of plugging them in there. So that's it for the features of the charter. Before I go to the next slide, I want to stop here for any questions. I know it's a lot, it's a fire hose, and I'm going quick fast, but feel free. Okay.
I have one more, sorry.
Oh, go on.
You said we don't need all and we can add others. What would be examples of other things that other towns have added?
I'd have to pull some other charters up.
It really would be that
I-
unique to each and every.
Correct. It is, yeah, I can't think of too many that are not subsumed in maybe parts of these, but for example, I guess the only example that comes to mind, and you're not in this situation, but a community that, we had a community, Framingham, moved from town meeting to a mayor council form of government. And so one of the unique features of their charter, they kept a different version of their finance committee. And so that would have been a feature that you wouldn't normally see in a city form of charter that they've got a section for. And so one of these, and I want to just stop here for 1 second. Again, this is sort of big picture. In Massachusetts, you've got two pathways to create a charter. One is under what's called Home Rule Authority, Chapter 43B of Massachusetts state law. That's not how we're operating, I'm just telling you about it. But that is where the community sort of gets together, gets a number of signatures, and calls for the election of an elected charter committee. That elected charter committee would do the work that you're doing, but they have a sort of a tighter time frame set under state law, and then they produce something that actually doesn't have to go to the legislature. Once the community votes to adopt it, that community has a charter. We're following what's called the special act route. Every community has the power to send a bill to the state legislature to ask for the state legislature to pass a law that sort of that covers just that town, not the whole state. One of the benefits of the special act route is that to the extent that you might not have the ability to exercise a power under state law, if you put it in your charter, you get to divert from that provision of state law. For example, let's say certain budgetary procedures, things like that. You say we want to do it a certain way in Rutland, legislature approves it, and that's part of your charter. That becomes something that this community can do. We often say that this route also there's some stability, so you can change your bylaws every time you have a town meeting. The select board and the town administrator can change local policy whenever they meet, but you can only change the special act with the approval of the select board. So by taking some of these provisions out of your bylaws, you add a level of stability to them that they might not otherwise have, and that's one of the benefits of the charter. And then transparency. Oftentimes when communities need to make changes that are sort of unique to them, they will be spread across your bylaws, special acts, you're looking at different provisions of state law. And for the novice, it might be hard to figure out, why does this provision of my government work like this? Who do I go to for that? And by putting them all in one document that you've adopted, everybody has a single source of truth, and both officials and members of the public, they know where to look to know where their rights and responsibilities are. So those are just some of the benefits of the charter.
Anthony, with the special act, if any portion of the charter need to be changed, it has to go back through the state legislature, correct?
That is correct,
Okay, that's what I thought.
that's correct.
Is there another one called home rule? Is that a different?
So that was the first one I talked about. So the home, it's actually sort of a more,
I use the term because I just have read that before, home rule.
it's a harder practice. So the home rule path, it's sort of community generated where people generate like a petition, for example. And once you reach a certain, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but once you reach a certain number of signatures, an item goes on the ballot. And the ballot question is, do we want to adopt a home rule charter? That's number one. And then number two, the next question is the people that will be on this commission. Once, if the ballot measure passes, then those people are elected to the commission. They have what's called and the same thing, an inaugural meeting. And then they've got, I believe it's an 18-month timeline set in state law that they have to present their charter. They would be doing the same work you're gonna be doing, except they would have had to have been elected and they have to follow the specific provisions
But
of
we
state
went this
law.
other route with the special act, correct? Yep,
Correct.
that's what I thought. I remember that. Yep, good, thanks.
And that was, is anybody else confused about that? I know that's. Yeah. Okay. Don't all pepper me with questions. And so the process for this review. So you are appointed, you're convened, you're gonna go, we go through, I have a work plan that I will distribute to you for your next meeting. And I think there's two important parts to the work plan. Number one, it breaks up the different parts of the charter into the sections. Some sections go together, some sections you'll deal with on their own. That you'll review them, you'll review what the community currently does, and you'll look at some of the best practices from around the state. Mixed in there, you're probably gonna wanna meet with certain town officials. So let's say we're on the executive portion, you've got a member of the select board on the committee that you can ask questions of, but you may wanna bring in the town administrator to say, what is your day-to-day? If we make this change or this tweak, or we give you this authority, how will that change or affect what you do? One thing that we do see, which we'll see when we get to sort of trends, perhaps there's a committee that that would rather be appointed versus elected, and maybe you wanna consider doing something like that. You might wanna bring that committee in to sort of understand what they do before you make those types of changes, committees' positions. And then and consolidate some of those roles. So before you make big decisions like that, you're gonna wanna meet with those particular bodies that may be affected. And then number three, which is a very important one, at certain points, and usually there are about 2 points throughout the process, once you've started to actually write something, you wanna have a meeting where it's just you guys, and you're saying to the community, please come in, here's what we've written so far as our charter that may or may not change how things are done, and we just wanna hear from the public. And maybe we'll tweak something, maybe we won't, but we wanna know how the community feels about it. We recommend that happens at really 2 points. So one is, sort of, once you've got through some of the meatier sections, we recommend, I usually recommend doing things like the executive and the legislative first, because those are things people really understand and care about. Once you make some decisions about those things, have the public meeting, people may have strong feelings one way or the other, and then you can do the rest of the charter when you get near to finishing, then you can have another meeting sort of about the whole document. Now, a thing like a charter is very esoteric, most people aren't really gonna have a big grasp on it, they're not going to as many meetings as you, but if you give them something that they can chew on, you'll be able to hear concerns if there are any, and you'll be able to address them, or at least explain why. You'll understand the concern and be able to speak to it when it's time for this thing to go before a town meeting. At the end of the process, you're gonna produce your final sort of legislative document that will be the special act that goes to the state. It will be accompanied by a final report. And again, sort of as I explained, this will go to town meeting to be sent to the state. The final report is actually very useful. As you're gonna see, there's a number of issues. You know, every community has issues, but every issue is not necessarily supposed to go into the charter. So that report is a good place to put things for future charter committees to perhaps review or look at, or perhaps other bodies in the town to say, we noticed this issue in our debate or when we had public meetings, and you know, if you could take a look at it, that would be great. So some more about the committee's works. We're gonna research the structure. Like I said, we're gonna go through the research and the public comment, and you're gonna prepare a report. The process generally takes 12 to 18 months. It doesn't have to take that long, but I don't wanna, there have been times when I've under-promised and say, hey, you guys can really go through this, and we've gone to the 18 months part. So I'd say prepare yourself to spend it, you know, at least probably a year. My assumption is this committee's meeting twice a month or once a month.
Well,
That's to
yeah,
be
we'll have to talk
discussed,
about that,
yeah.
yeah. You haven't even discussed it.
Okay, so that'll be a
What
discussion.
do you recommend for an
Well,
18-month in the town our size, what you're looking at?
I've seen most committees meet about twice a month, so maybe an hour, 2 hours twice a month. And if you, like, so the summertime, it'll usually break down to
Get it out a little.
once a month, things like that.
A little harder than, yeah.
And this is the process that happens when it goes to the state. So the bill will be converted to a petition, the legislature will consider it. One of the things that often does happen, that you really have to consider is, you can send a bill to the legislature in two different forms. You can say one form is, we want you to take an up and down vote on this bill. Or, we want you to take an up and down vote on this bill, but you can amend the bill. And we usually recommend you put that language in to say, to let them amend the bill, because they won't just amend it on the fly. They'll usually reach out to the town and say, hey, we've got an issue with this portion of this section, can we make this change? At that point, it'll be sort of out of your hands, the committee will get it to the town, but that allows the town through the select board to sort of have that discussion to say, is this important that it be changed or kept? Again, and the final step is that even after the legislature approves it, and, the town meeting has voted on it, the legislature has approved it, it appears on the ballot, and everyone in town gets to vote to say yes or no, we do want this particular charter to come into effect for our community.
Is all that time part of the 18 months or just our work?
That's outside of
That's
this.
just for us to get to the point to hand it over to the legislature.
Correct.
Let me ask you a question. Is it good advice when it gets to the legislative as a petition to bill to have, at this point, it's
10-year committee.
it's Kim Ferguson and
Take 10 years.
Peter, have them as our representative and our senator behind the bill or do we just send it there, or do we have the support of our representative staff? Take it as a, what's the word I'm looking for, sponsor, they're a sponsor of the bill.
I haven't, well, I'll guess I'll answer the question too, is I haven't seen the committee do that work necessarily with speaking with the state delegation. What I have seen is after the committee's done its work, if the select board
Okay.
gets behind it, that they'll do some of that sort of background lobbying, but I haven't seen that part of the committee process.
Excellent.
Is it pretty much a rubber stamp though, going through the legislature?
Not always. As an example, and actually, the example I have is for a city form of government, but for example, it wouldn't go to so a city form of government, you wouldn't go to town meeting, you'd go to the city council. And I've seen provisions where the city council, if let's say there's 9 members, if only 5 members voted to send the bill up,
Yep.
I've seen it kick back. We wanna see a large margin of support. So let's say you go to town meeting and it's a squeaker at town meeting, that's kind of, they're gonna be aware of that, your delegation and the legislature, and that's gonna be an area where they're gonna say, maybe we shouldn't pass this. Maybe we'll send it back and say, we don't approve. So that's why we recommend, we don't wanna make this a hugely political process, but you do wanna be aware of your community, what their needs and their concerns are, because you wanna make something that's successful. And then the other part is, don't get discouraged, because this is a relatively new thing. The town's been existing since, I think,
1713.
Yeah, 17. And, so you've been around for a long time, so this is a brand new thing, and so maybe a few bites at the apple. But again, the more closely and you're part of the community, but the more closely you just understand and you wanna give the best chance it can, even if this is gonna be the first of multiple bites at the apple.
Anthony, do you also recommend that, how do I say this, advertise the heck out of it, like on our town website, and make sure the town knows what's going on and keep them in the loop heavily?
I do recommend, so I'm on another project in Nantucket. They regularly, and I don't know what the local papers are, but they regularly try to have, maybe every 2 to 3 months, they try to have an editorial in their local paper about it. We recommend communities, I think you guys do have a page on the website, if, just put maybe a link to a survey or something, so that at the end of your meetings, it's not necessarily a super scientific survey, but it's somewhere to say, you've heard our meetings, you've heard our discussions, we'd love to get your input, please go to the website and click the link and give us your feedback. And again, in the public meetings are part of that. It's part of that, sort of staying in the public and making sure that they feel like they've been fully engaged. They're almost a 10th member of your committee, sitting there giving you feedback.
I'll just add, so I think as long as the committee's okay with it and we'll work with the chair, we'll any sort of documents that are produced at this meeting, for example, this presentation, we will post to the website.
Oh, it's a PDF.
So you can always, for the membership, but also for the
Refer
public,
back,
they can
yeah.
see the
Great
materials
idea.
that you receive.
I think it's a good idea, right?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Okay, sure.
I have a question. For the final step where it says, if required by the legislature or the town, the voters will approve or disapprove the proposed legislation on a town election ballot. Is that set in the charter? Does the state legislators determine, like,
That will be, so, again, a double answer to your question. So it could be, so I usually recommend, especially for changes like this, that you would put it in the bill that goes up to the legislature. You put in, it wouldn't be part of the charter per se, but it would be part of the bill that says, we want to come back with a vote as of this date.
Okay.
You could send one up without that, and again, based on what you're doing here, creating a brand new charter, I would expect that the legislature would amend your petition to say, we want it to be voted on locally. But we recommend that we would recommend you put it on. It isn't required for everything, but for, let's say, for example, you change the terms of offices, or you stagger, I don't know if the elections are staggered now, but if you staggered elections, those would be things that would require town approval anyway.
okay.
I gotta ask the devil's advocate, have you seen a charter go up to the legislative, get kicked back, and then the town kill it?
Then the town can, well,
Like it passes, yeah, that it
yeah.
passes at town meeting, cause that's, I think, where we struggle sometimes, is town meeting will pass things and then it fails at the ballot. And I think
Yeah.
that that's a little bit, as far as just the timing, that it's been so far removed by that point from the public
that's what I was getting at.
engagement piece, that people tend to see anything and just, any ballot question default, no.
oh, I can't think of any off the top of my head.
Okay.
Sitting here with you, yeah.
So we get to be the first.
No, Chris. All positive.
have that for next time.
We just have to get them to the ballot.
But it goes to state legislature, then back for final approval by the
It
town.
goes from this committee to the select board,
To
to the
state.
town meeting,
Oh,
to the state, and then back to appear on the ballot.
Can it be
why
amended?
the last step? The very last step.
Well, this, not to sort of disparage it, but town meeting isn't usually everyone. Your elections generally get a larger portion of the population to participate than your town meeting. So
Okay.
that's part of the that's part of why it's usually required.
Would the legislature amend it a little bit before it comes back to the town ballot?
They may depend, well,
Is
like I
that a
said,
reason why they want that? In case they
well,
change something?
They wanna make sure, to speak candidly, I mean, they're elected as well, so they don't wanna send something back and have something adopted where it's like, why did you force this on? You know, some people, everybody's not gonna be as fully engaged, so for some people, it might really be a surprise, even at that late stage.
2 months after they swallow it, so to speak, right?
Exactly.
They don't wanna be the
That's a lot,
ones holding the bag at the end of the day.
Exactly, so it's just one more place to say, we've all had a part in this process.
Yeah.
And it's a decision we've made as a
It's
community.
an extra safety net, yeah.
Exactly. So general trends. So I alluded to this earlier. These are not things that you guys, I'm telling you guys to do or not to do, but these are just some trends that we're seeing across communities in Massachusetts. So generally speaking, a reduction in the number of elected officials and boards, centralization of management. A lot of this seems to be around the level of professionalism that the state is requiring a lot more, think about this sort of the best, they're just requiring a lot more sort of the crossing of Ts and dotting of Is and a lot of things. One of the ones that comes to my mind is like, let's say your highway superintendent. I think historically, especially in smaller towns, those, and many places still do have like an elected highway commissioner. More places are going to a consolidated like DPW department with a professional DPW manager. And again, a lot of that is driven by the complexity that that work has, you know, that work's becoming
Developed
complex.
into, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Again, not saying that you guys have to do that, but that's just the trend that we're seeing across the state. An emphasis on budget process, particularly around transparency, and consistently along how it's done. I spoke to you a little bit about the long-term capital plan. Again, we recommend working in a 5-year capital plan that is reviewed every year. Highlighting, and it says highlighting specifically because you have under state law and under the state constitution, home rule authority, and just emphasizing that in your charter so that people understand how sort of robust their local government really can be. Emerging technology, we just had this discussion about taking notes. And there are some places in the charter where it makes sense to put that in, particularly around notice. So, you know, you go back in time, notices in the local newspaper, how many local newspapers are there anymore?
Constable
especially
has
with
to do the notice and
Yeah,
post it.
with the daily circulation, so you're gonna see, putting it should be on our webpage or should be in some other digital location, is an update we're seeing to charters. Again, standardization or for, to comply with sort of local and state laws, a lot of that could be around personnel, the removal of gender references, a lot of your historical charters are written in the, the he, the male sort of voice. And again, periodic charter review, make this a living document, make this something that you're looking at periodically, to go with the changing times.
Question, if I may, Chairman?
Sure, go ahead, Harry.
When you say, can you go back to the previous requirement for periodic reviews of charter and bylaws? So the charter doesn't do away with the bylaws.
The charter does not do away with the bylaws. The charter, I think the good example is the charter is like the Constitution.
Okay.
We still have laws in Massachusetts. The charters are really about, and I have a slide in here about it, it's not so much about you pass bylaws to solve problems. We need to put money somewhere, we need to fund this, or we need to control noise here, or this, that, and the other. The charter is more about who's got the authority, how do they exercise it, and how do we divide that authority across decision makers in town. So it's not so much about, solving specific community issues. It's about people understanding who's got what power and those people understanding how they can or can't use it.
So it's like the organizational top works of the running of the town.
Correct.
Right, the town shouldn't be run by the bylaws. The charter should be running the bylaws.
Correct.
Okay, perfect.
Excellent.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Harry, yep.
So if we change bylaws, do then we have to change the charter?
No.
If it affects the charter?
No, in fact, the charter sits above the bylaws.
Okay.
So the bylaws really can't conflict with the charter.
Okay.
So it's really the other way around. So one of the things that goes in particular that transition section is after the charter is adopted, if there are some changes, there's an automatic committee that should be formed to review your bylaws and to look at which bylaws should be excised or amended or whatever. So for example, like I said, you guys have a actually very robust section about town meeting, select board, and the town administrator.
Town manager, we've got two, or town administrator, we've got two, so
Yeah.
that would be in the charter now, so we
So
have
that would be
to.
excised from the
Yeah.
bylaws.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep. A third or?
Oh, good, thank you. Appreciate it.
So a continuation is residency requirements, again, mechanisms to ensure that the charter is enforced. And we talked about resident initiatives and just sort of putting the residents sort of front and center where appropriate in the charter. So sort of that's it for our.
That third one, Anthony, definition of defining coordination of emergency management activities and resources. How does that work in the charter when typically it's been under the fire and police chief? Is that defined within the charter or?
So, that is a trend, I think that's an older trend that I'm not seeing as much anymore.
Okay.
That's kind of why I skipped over it. So,
Okay, sorry.
there was a time, what was it, maybe 10 years ago when we'd been hit with a number of tornadoes and,
Yep.
And sort of.
Ice
other natural
storms, things like
disasters,
that.
And it had become a conversation in a lot of charter committees.
Okay.
So what are you guys gonna be doing as next steps? So I said before, I'd recommend, but we should really have a discussion about how you wanna sort of have your conversation about this charter topic, but I recommend going really section by section and comparing what you do versus what you could do. And when you're looking at any given section, to have the sort of question in your mind, is there an issue in this section that's facing Rutland? There may not be, things may be working perfectly, you may wanna just port that section over or whatever existing procedures you have to the charter. But you always wanna be sort of asking that question and think about what other people in the community might have as an issue. Remember, as I talked about, not all issues can be resolved in the charter. And really not all issues should be resolved in the charter because there are things that you want to be able to fix flexibly either through town policy or your town meeting. And I sort of already went through this a little bit, but what should your charter focus on? Who's making the decision? I want, you want to spread it across the different decision makers of the town. You're thinking about whether these decision makers should be elected versus appointed, should be bodies or should be individuals.
Good question. Is there anything that dictates like when a committee is, appointed versus elected? Are there any rules or laws around that?
So there are some, so particularly around like your planning board, your ZBA, there are a few others, I don't know if you have a, I think your select board would be, is your select board your licensing authority for liquor licenses? So the state law does dictate around some areas, but you probably have other committees that were created under sort of town power. One of the things exercise that we go through when we get to this section about committees, particularly elected committees, is we look at, we go back about 10 years and we say, are the elections competitive? So we look at the elections and we say, are you only getting one candidate? And so that says that your electorate isn't getting a choice between different, visions perhaps, for that position. And then you might have not to say that that'll mean you get rid of it, but you have a discussion about if it's not competitive, if people aren't running for it, then why do we have it and can we do it a different way? And it just sort of is part of that discussion. So, and then decision-making processes, how much public input should a particular process have? Does it need to be quick or slow? Should all the authority be rested in one decision maker or spread across multiple? So those are just some of the things that you sort of think about your charter. And then, there's 9 of you. You're going to have all different passions and things of that nature. And a group may say this is not appropriate for the charter, but that shouldn't be. Think of the report as an outlet. It's not that some concern that you have is totally thrown out the window. We can sort of articulate sort of this minority position in the report that says, this came up, we had a robust discussion on it, we couldn't resolve it in our group. Please, select board, please planning board, whoever, if you could take a look once we receive this report, that would be great. And here's kind of what we discussed. And so those were some, so that's sort of how you're gonna go through each section. And sort of that's it. And I'm sort of turning it back to you. I think there was a discussion about how often you're gonna meet. And then I will sort of put this one slide back up. We generally recommend to sort of look at to go through it section by section, but there are other ways that we can sort of approach this topic that might be best for the group. So, I look forward to that sort of discussion about how you want to approach this.
One question, just going back to the charter itself, is there, when people are creating these procedures and allotting the power, so to speak, is there an accountability, power, can be a dangerous thing sometimes. And the check and balance, right? I mean, that's what our government's all about. Is that part of this process as well?
Exactly. So again, another good example is, let's say you give the town administrator this power around reorganizing departments. Because that person's here day to day, they see how things are functioning, and they may say, I need another position in this department, they need a deputy or something like that.
This area's getting,
But you don't want them making that decision in a silo. In a vacuum. Yeah, exactly. So you may say they can only do that with the approval of, or with the, you can say approval, or review of the select board. And there's a number of things like, you can give the select board some extra authority, but only, but it can be overturned, let's say, by a town meeting. And, so there's places where you can say, and that's that sort of whole power dynamic. It's not about giving one entity all the power. It's about who do we think is appropriate to make the decision, and then how do we give the appropriate oversight or sort of, and a big part of that is also around the citizen participation mechanisms, where we see a lot of like, and you want to be careful. There actually are very subtly crafted language around, if the community doesn't like something that was done, what should their redress be? And we usually sort of recommend you only want sort of the citizens to create a petition that can sort of remove something if it reaches a certain threshold. Again, we're talking about outside of regular town meeting things. We're talking about other areas. So, but again, they're subtle, they're carefully crafted, and you're sort of right on the head. You want to give people the power to do the job that you are expecting them to do, but you don't want to give them too much that they are totally outside of anyone's oversight or that they don't have any sort of pushback where appropriate.
You don't want to handcuff them either. You want to do their job and be effective and get it done, right?
Exactly.
Anthony, I gotta ask one question, it's always been my trouble spot. Within the charter, how does what Massachusetts allows, a citizen's petition, how does that fall into charter questions or what was being asked by Chris about, the checks and balances? How does that play into the charter? That's always been my sort of weak point.
So I would say it's most prominently displayed in council forms of government, because in a council form of government, the citizens don't have the ability to put anything on the agenda. They have to go to a council and say, can you please hear this, put that on the agenda. Here in the town council form, in the town meeting form, everyone, when town meeting comes around, they have the ability to submit an agenda item, an item to go before the town meeting. Obviously, there's, I know there's always some wrangling around, the lawyer saying that it is appropriate or isn't appropriate, and then I've seen some communities that have a lot of these sort of petitions, and some of them they think aren't actionable or things like that nature. So you put some process around it, which are generally sort of protected around the citizen petition piece. But for towns, I've seen mechanisms around citizens petitions around not necessarily making the select board do anything, but making sure that citizens can present something to have them debate it, right? But I want the select board to discuss this, so some mechanisms around that. And then, not to say that it's required, but recall language is one that we see used. Again, that's part of the citizens' ability to be sort of a check against authority. Again, for those things, you want to be very careful about them because you don't want to elect somebody Tuesday and recall them Wednesday. You'll never
Slippery slope is
Yeah.
what.
You never get them in.
Yeah, that's a
Especially
slippery
nowadays.
slope you gotta play with, I know that, yeah. Okay, great, thanks.
I have a quick question. In other towns that have done charters, has it helped to streamline their town government? Or, which I'm guessing is the ultimate thing that people want, is that correct or not correct?
I would say that there's, oh, sorry. go on.
No, that's, or, add extra layers to the government. Not to make it more difficult, but to just add some more, I don't know, accountability or more steps for how this town is run.
I would say, so it's a careful characteristic. I wouldn't say that I've seen any project where the town sort of added layers, but there are towns, communities, municipalities, cities that have added extra places for community input. But I would say these projects really fall into one of two buckets. One is we don't have a charter, we haven't had a charter, but we need to crystallize what we've been doing in a way that, because we've kind of been doing it because we've been doing it, but we don't know why we're doing it. We've just been doing what's been done. And so we crystallize it. Yeah, we crystallize a document, we understand, we consciously choose to be this type of entity. And we're not really changing a whole lot, but we're making a statement about how we want our government to run, and we're doing it that way. And then there's the other type where they really are looking at increasing efficiency. And they don't, I think it's often presented as sort of a one or the other, but I would say in the end, it always works out to people can do the job that they need to get done, right? If there's something in the process that's inhibiting it. But it's not at the expense of public engagement or public involvement. That's, in fact, a lot of these provisions around resident participation and some others come from how do we get the effectiveness of our municipal officials that we want, but are still accountable to the public. So I would say it's an iterative and evolving process, and you guys may, in the process, discover something new. But those are, to the projects that the communities that want to run more efficiently, they try very hard and not to make it at the expense of public engagement. We've got communities that are changing from town meeting to council. And again, a lot of people they get a little concerned about losing the ability to participate through town meeting. We try to create a lot of avenues where those people can still be heard and still feel engaged. So it's not one versus the other, so to speak.
Any other questions?
So a select board meeting is open to the public. Have you had a situation where people form a committee and somebody says, can somebody freely come into the committee and add input? Or is it the people just sitting on the committee that, during the process, if they say, I want to be involved in this charter committee, can you add people, or if people leave, what is the process for that? Is there any input during the formation of the charter?
So, well, these are all public meetings.
Okay.
And so, the public is invited.
Okay.
Committees usually have either a dedicated section for public input, but I've seen a lot of committees that, as you're having your discussion, hey, so-and-so wants to be heard, yeah.
Like right now, I just let
Okay.
Harry speak,
Okay.
but we could have held them off till
Right.
like the end of our
Right.
discussion and then had an open, the public session, but
Right.
you know, we just.
Which we may have to do depending on.
Exactly, absolutely right. If you get a big crowd, if we're really looking for big input, we'll explain our piece, go to our thing, and then open it up to them. We'll have our discussions, and then we hear from them.
Exactly.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
But I don't, as far as, I did hear one question, as far as, if someone had to leave this committee for whatever reason, over 18 months, right, life can happen. Is there a procedure for that, replacing someone or adding someone?
So I
Select
think,
board would have to
I think it would go through the normal process that
Oh, it
happens
is.
for the other appointed boards and committees. So I believe the individual would have to file their resignation with the town clerk's office. And then the select board would have to officially accept the resignation and then put out a call for additional, interest and then appoint, through the select board, similar to how everybody was appointed.
Okay, so there are 7 members plus you, plus yourself and Tim from the boards, so a total of 9. Do we have to have a quorum, and what, is there a number for that at every meeting? What would that number be?
Yeah, so I think for a committee of 9, the quorum would be 5, right?
5.
You have to have a majority plus 1, or the majority, right?
So when we do announce the meetings, if anybody, just please email everybody saying you can't make it, because that'll help us know if we're not gonna have a quorum, then we would just cancel that meeting prior to showing up and saying, oh, we only got 3 or 4 people here. So just keep that in mind if you're unable to make the
And
meeting.
through the chair, you can participate in a meeting through Zoom too. So if you physically can't be here, but you can get on a computer, that's considered.
physically
You just
or
have to-
Zoom.
You just have to take a roll call vote as opposed to, saying aye and nay, so that's.
Hopefully the legislature's gonna put that in permanently come March. I think it's up for renewal the end of March, and
Yeah, again.
I know at MMA they were talking about that's a priority of them to get it in permanently. I feel like it's been a conversation since COVID but
So Zoom will be for,
hopefully, I mean, it's not done
it
yet.
helps out when you can't make it and you know,
This
you
is
can
the
still.
second time, cause it was COVID and they renewed it and now this is number 3.
Any other questions for Attorney Wilson?
Excellent presentation.
Oh, sorry, Harry, didn't see that.
Tim, go ahead.
No, I just was gonna say it was a phenomenal presentation. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Harry, go ahead.
Yeah, how much time will you be here with the committee?
I think under the contract, I plan to be at least 1 meeting a month, at least. I think we have capacity for more than that. It may be myself and at least another member of the team, so it might be 2 of us at any given meeting. Usually it'll be me. And it may be by Zoom for certain meetings, but you'd know that well ahead of time. One thing I would say is we generally meet with what I call sort of the leadership team. Usually it's the chair, the vice chair, perhaps the clerk, to say, okay, you discussed this, and we sort of help you sort of formulate your,
Frame it up.
the agenda for the next meeting. So we can help you sort of think through that.
And we have the ability to reach out to you and ask questions for that offline, out of the meeting.
Correct.
We're not breaking any rules or laws or anything. Okay.
Yeah, usually it's all through the chair.
Anything else?
Okay, thank you.
I think looking ahead, as far as the 2 meetings a month, I think it's a good way to start out, try to get some momentum and traction going. I know, if you're like me a little bit, it's an awful lot to consume in 1 hour session, so don't feel bad. We'll get through it and we'll work through it all, but getting right at it and trying to get two nights in a month, I think is the right approach. If anybody feels otherwise, please, what do you guys think about that, trying to get 2 nights? And if that's the case, what night of the week works good for
I'm
everybody?
gonna say this one, cause this works, Thursday night works out great for me.
I was gonna say, Thursdays are generally okay, but it's budget season right now, so oftentimes we have joint select board and FinCom meetings on Thursdays. Wednesdays are often good as far as other meetings, but I don't know, I mean, that's, I think, looking at kind of town meetings. I think Wednesdays tend to not have a lot of other town meetings, but I don't know what works the best for everyone else.
Wednesdays are fine.
I have no preference. Every week's gonna be.
Yeah, I just
I'm
have
pretty
to
open.
schedule them. I work 12-hour shifts, so as long as we had a set day, yeah.
Yeah.
4 weeks ahead of time. But if we had a set day, I can just schedule.
Thursdays are better. I don't know if I could do Wednesdays.
Tuesday's good for everybody?
I can't, I've got
Yeah, do
meetings 2
Tuesdays.
times a month, I
Tuesday's
can't
not
tell you.
good for me.
Yeah, it's
Wednesday or
tough.
Thursday's fine for me.
Thursdays might be a little tricky for me, but honestly, I should be able to make most of them. But just shoot for Thursdays and,
Chris,
There's
is
a particular week
6:30
we gotta
does 6:30 help you out instead of 6?
no, it doesn't really matter. It's just I wouldn't be able to make it at all, but I should, it would be wouldn't be too often.
Would it
It'd be
help
once in 3 or 4 months, that's all.
to do an alternate Wednesday, Thursday situation, or does that get too confusing for people?
I think it gets from experience, I think it gets confusing, I think
Okay.
having just a set
It is nice just
day,
to-
whatever it is.
Okay.
Used to the confusion, I'm like, yeah, I like that idea.
Mondays I can't, cause we have select board meetings.
That's right.
Is there any possibility to push it back to a later, like 6:30 or 7?
I was gonna ask that question, cause 6 for me getting from Southborough is is not easy.
Later is easier for me, but especially if we're trying to keep them to a 2-hour maximum or something, but I don't know how the rest of the committee, like I said, Thursdays are gonna be, I think for the next couple months, I'll do my absolute best, but it's gonna be tough because we'll have a lot of FinCom budget meetings unless FinCom is able to switch their meeting nights, but they've traditionally always been Thursday nights.
And how often do they meet?
They don't have regular scheduled meetings, it's just that we're in budget season now, so they generally meet much more frequently during budget season. Sometimes it's weekly sometimes, or bi-monthly, so,
So if we could look at what their schedule is, or
we
can't nail them down on
Right,
on dates,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So right now, if we, personally speaking, if we did, this is one, and then in 2 weeks from tonight, so the 13th of February would be our next meeting. We just go 2 weeks after that. I know I miss one Thursday night conflict in March, so that would work for me, just to springboard 2 weeks off of this night and keep it on Thursday nights. I'm happy to do whatever hour, I can do any time at night.
Are you
on a
okay with
different-
Thursdays then, later in the day?
Thursdays seem to work the best for
Thursday a
everybody.
little later would be best for me, but I could.
Does anybody have a problem with Thursday?
No, I think,
Just Leah with the finance, right?
yeah, I
Just
think,
Running into the finance.
yeah, and I
Do you know
know,
what nights those are right now, Leah?
I mean,
Next one is on the 13th.
Is it?
yeah. Yeah, and I think that they'll probably, honestly, given our budget situation, my guess is they're probably gonna be almost weekly or every other week, or, is that kind of your sense? Not up to me.
all
Yeah.
I would ask is if we just go a half an hour, cause I can guarantee I can be here at 6:30.
We're seven's okay for me too.
When you get to 7, the
go
problem
home.
is if we do 2 hours, it's 9 o'clock at night then, and
Cause
that,
even then, if I do have to work, I
And
have to come
if these
after.
guys, you probably live an hour away too.
Yeah.
yeah, I don't wanna keep that drive at night.
Like I said,
Don't worry about me, you guys have.
No, I know.
for me, for just town process wise, Wednesdays are generally nights that there aren't a whole lot of town meetings. I know when we were doing other committee meetings, we kind of did like ad hoc committee meetings, we were doing them on Wednesdays because it didn't interfere with Concom or Planning Board or FinCom. If other residents wanted to participate also with some of the consideration as well, that they weren't having to pick and choose, but
Maybe we
that's-
talk to Alex and ask him to move to Wednesday.
Who had a problem with
Yeah,
Wednesday?
until May.
Okay.
Yeah, Wednesday nights I can't do.
You can't do Wednesday nights?
At all, okay.
I struggle with that, cause I usually have got emergencies, midweek's always my nightmare with work.
And Tuesdays don't work as
I
well, right?
can't,
So you
yeah.
can't do that.
Mondays and Tuesdays are select board and planning board and, do Thursdays, we can, I'll do what I can if I have to hop between meetings or, if we can see if FinCom would be amenable to some meetings not being on
What time do you
Thursday.
start with FinCom, Leah?
FinCom I think usually starts 6:15-ish.
How long will that go, that meeting?
8 to 10 hours.
Yeah, they're
We'll have to
not,
work on that in the charter, okay? Just
yeah. Can we do it for all boards and committee meetings, please? But yeah,
That's usually 6. Yeah.
is it, are they
Yeah,
usually
that one's on
okay.
6.
Okay.
Anything
so
over an
maybe-
hour is non-productive anyway, so.
What if we, just if you don't mind, for the next month or two, just start at 7? And then once they're done their work, maybe push it back to 6:30 or whatever. That would give Leah a little bit of time to do whatever she needs to do, and if she needs to pop over, or also by that time it's a little later at night, people don't mind. We could start at 10 o'clock at night, I'd be fine with that.
Oh,
That's
God,
me.
no.
No, but-
Yeah, I'm gonna be up at 4:30.
Just a
I mean, it's a
suggestion.
great idea, I'm certainly flexible to start a little later, and we can work that out on a weekly basis. And try to work with your schedule over the next few weeks.
Yeah.
Do you think it'll be kind of wrapped up in a month or so?
No,
Hopefully, no.
about May
Gotta work on
2nd,
that one,
is
put that
when
one
you'll
down
have-
too in the chat, we're getting busy here, we might need
Yeah,
more than
right.
18 months.
We don't have frequent, we could talk, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, schedule what works for the rest of the committee, and like I said, FinCom usually meets here, if we're meeting here, then I can,
You're not far away, if we needed you for something.
right, I can
That's
pop
true, too.
in, or,
It's really something we gotta
come in
maybe
and
just.
speak my piece and then go, or whatever, like,
Chris, we've also, with this, I mean, the committee's 9 people, but the other rooms can accommodate this committee too, we have to.
it's not so much a room thing, it's just,
Oh, it's people, yeah.
it's, right, and I was just trying to be mindful of especially knowing what the budget's looking like this year, if public wanted to participate in FinCom meetings and
And-
this meeting also,
Yeah.
that they weren't having the public wasn't having to pick and choose either, but FinCom doesn't usually have any
lot of
public
people.
interest.
And I wouldn't expect early on there'll be too much
Yeah.
public
Yeah.
interest or even our need for their input too
Right.
early on.
Right.
So at least,
Cause we gotta figure it out first. What?
we can't ask for that, we'll do it first. Okay,
So we'll do Thursdays at
6:30?
6:30.
just try that, give you,
That.
I will just shoot for that, and then we'll just take each, next one at a time. So the next one will be the 13th.
So it would be 13 and 27 for
Yeah, and I think what that does too, if, I know you're a teacher, but that week of vacation is in the middle of that, so that may help for, I don't hate to have them during that week too, if anybody's off that week. So,
I do have a board meeting on the 13th in that room over there at 7, but I'll
okay.
I'll make myself available.
What board meeting?
Rutland Little League, I'm the secretary.
So maybe we have to get the Blair room, right?
So are you in the smaller conference room or the big one?
We're in the big one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so just,
See, we can
we'll
switch.
book the Calkins room, this room, actually the bylaw committee is meeting in this room on the 13th at 7.
Okay.
So we can book the other smaller conference room for you.
Where's the
Is
FinCom
FinCom
and
gonna
select
be
board
there?
meeting?
Well, they're gonna have to be moved.
This,
Yeah.
oh, no, yeah, Austin,
Oh,
is-
okay.
Austin, do you have one more of these packets?
yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Should get one, you're welcome. Alright, so. 13th.
If we get into meeting space, and I don't know the answer to this, is the, town, I don't even know what to call it anymore, on Glenwood, is that available for us to meet if we have to? Okay,
With Zoom?
with Zoom, that's the problem, I don't know if I don't think they've got internet, do they?
They have internet,
We would have to have the set taken over there, there's nothing over there, and the acoustics are terrible.
Do you have to have Zoom nowadays? Like, is that,
I thought you voted on it, cause we voted not to for the events committee.
No,
is this
there's
different,
certain
or-
boards,
This-
there's certain boards that
We have to, planning
have to
board, you
have
guys
it,
have
it's in,
to.
Okay.
I think it was in the updated bylaws, but I think there's more and more push to have more and more boards and committees
Transparency.
We're gonna have it.
have
We're
Zoom,
gonna write it right in. Everybody's
and-
gonna-
and I think
man.
for something like this especially that requires a lot of public participation, I think is important to have access.
The Wood Studio, they can set up over there if they have to, if I
that does
remember
have
right.
Zoom, yep.
Yeah, it does, so, and there's enough to get 9 people in there,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
in public,
Yep.
so we could use that too if we have to.
alright, well, thank you very much, it was a great presentation. I look forward to working with you and anybody else from your staff there that'll be joining us. And it's great to meet all of you and look forward to.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
Can I just make, we'll probably talk more before your next meeting, but can I just recommend everyone a little bit of homework?
Yeah.
Just as you prepare for the next meeting. Again, this is all pretty new to most people, but maybe look at the slides and just think about what things in town government, and you can look at the sort of list of things we have here in the common features, sort of jump out to you in questions or thoughts you might have, and we can start to think about where this committee wants to focus.
I was gonna give you some homework through the chair. Do you have, can you provide to the committee some charters that are, the 8 to 12,000? That would be examples and to look over so people can get familiar what, charters look like and stuff inside. I know I found one and I'd said earlier, Sutton was a nice one that was a nice chart to look at, cause they were about 9,000, 10,000 people, so.
I think
But I'm sure there's plenty more of those.
if I may,
Yeah, you're
I was
wrong.
gonna say, I think one of the ones we had kind of referenced in our discussion was Hubbardston. They're a smaller community, but they're also a regional school district as well, and so because we have Wachusett, but we also have Bay Path, so we have two regional schools with two separate elected school committees and everything, so that's another.
The regional service of fire too, and rescue, right?
Right, yeah, that they have the
know, that was
dispatch
in
and
there, I know
everything
it's not a big
also,
topic, but
yeah.
might come
So
into play.
I think they don't quite have the population
Yep.
that Rutland does, but as far,
I just was looking to get a bunch of them,
Oh, that's great,
give us a
yeah.
lot of
We could definitely do
different solutions, cause you can pick and choose and put together.
Would that be
stuff.
helpful to us to review those things? you think?
That's something that we regularly do, yes, that's something that would be on the agenda.
Excellent.
And one other thing, I just, is there a list of needs? You know, you're looking at something like this, you know, has anybody worked on a list of needs through the select board or, you know, the planning, kind of like of why we are redoing this charter, like we kind of, any department chairs or any departments, committees saying, we need to fix this, I'd like to tweak this, are there any of that information out there that we could compile right now, or is that part of our mission, obviously, going forward?
I think if I may, I
please.
think a big, and Austin, you probably have a perspective of being a staff also. I think in my conversations with kind of through the iterations of town administrator and everything was a need to really kind of formalize our form of government, especially with the addition of a town administrator role that's fairly new to town. And so to kind of formalize that above and beyond a bylaw. We just passed the bylaw, right, last year. And so to kind of formalize that and all of staff and electeds and appointeds, because through the iterations, right, I think the treasurer collector used to be elected. It moved in the past 10 or 15 years, I believe, to an appointed position, and there's that, we have the special act that the town clerk position will transition to an appointed position instead of an appointed meaning hired for position. And so there's been a lot of that, and to try to harness all of that through the special acts or what part of MGL was adopted when, and has it been rescinded, or what was town meeting's rationale behind it, and does it still
We did
make
it
the
10
most
years ago,
sense now that we have more kind of professional staff and everything? So I think from my personal, and this is
Yeah, no,
solely
that's
my
good.
personal
That's good, though,
perspective,
yep.
and that's talking with, Margaret and Bernie Litch when we did Community Paradigm, the interims, then with Mike Nicholson, when we worked with Ron and Austin and everybody,
Gary
it's
filled
just,
in.
yeah, just kind of the dynamics of all of it is to have that, and then the buy-in from the community, right, that this is formalized and this person or group is empowered to do this work and we support that as a community.
One more question.
Sure, please.
Any other documentation that we should get on hand for our next meeting from the town?
I guess my recommendation to the group would be, you're very early, you're just starting, so you're just sort of have yourselves here. So no, I will have some example charters to have here from other communities. We've also got and we'll have some other documentation. I think for this group, this is all very new to you, just think about, what are your concerns, because you're the members of the committee gonna be making a decision. Throughout this process, we're gonna be talking to parts of departments and other elected and appointed entities, and you're gonna learn a lot about what they do and where that does or doesn't fit in the charter. So for the next
Collect all
meeting,
that data.
yeah, I would say that for the next maybe 3 or 4 meetings, you're probably in a learning process. We're gonna pull out some bylaws that apply. So my suggestion, which you'll probably make a decision on next meeting, is you probably wanna start with the legislative branch. And we'll look at what you're doing now, why you're doing it this way, and whether you wanna keep doing it and what the language should be.
Is that what we'll do in the preamble? I'm sorry.
No.
That preamble, attorney will just kind of start figuring out what the next steps and whatnot at the next meeting?
Yeah, we
really-
should, my recommendation, when I've seen these really work well, is that you start with the branch, the section of the charter that has to do with the legislative branch. The preamble is really, the usual language in the preamble is something like, we, the town of Rutland, asserting our rights under home rule, want to have a fair and open government. So it's more of that aspirational
First
language.
paragraph of the Constitution.
It's a mission statement.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not necessarily something, it's not as meaty to sort of start with. So I don't usually go through these chronologically. I sort of start with it'll depend on what you guys say,
Start
but
with hard.
start with what's important to you. Is the executive important? Is the administrative organization important? I mostly see the town, let's talk about the town meeting where we have our most engagement. But again, that's for you to decide. It's just sort
And
of
then,
my
through
observation.
the chair, like the definitions and corporations will come as you're going through each one of those, you'll be adding to that section all the time. I
The
think.
legislation too seems like it has the most tentacles, like it reaches the most.
And it's the
So
thing people
it's
are
kind
most
of give
familiar with.
everybody a good,
Yep.
you grab on that one, you're gonna get a good feel for a lot of, the whole broad perspective of a lot of things in the town.
Yeah.
And if I'm, Michelle, to your point, if everybody is interested, the comprehensive bylaws are on the website, and they're the ones that were just passed at town meeting a year ago in last February, so those are there if anybody wants to, go through them as well.
We'll have a test in 2 weeks.
Austin, this is more of a question. Do we have an org chart in Rutland that shows the organization? That'd be something to give to the committee too, as we get into stuff, seeing the org chart of how everything's laid out in town, cause I know a little, but I don't know everything.
Sure, yep, I can send that.
So I have one more question, because I know we talked about schools and regional schools. Do you find that towns that are part of a regional school have a harder time developing a charter? Is there a special unique challenge? I'm, honestly, I mean, I guess it's on me, but I'm from Worcester, and it seemed like the school committee was smaller and for a larger population, because there's so many towns, and I don't know how it's dispersed out and how that fits in there. But is it just part of, I mean, you're part of a regional school, it's not like we're leaving the school district, so is it just as easy as if you're not a part of regional schools?
I would say in many ways it makes the process easier.
Okay.
If you think of easier as you have less decisions to make. This
Okay.
committee is not gonna decide to leave the regional school system. So
right.
in many ways, it's, for a community like this, there would be references to, where in the regional school system pursuant to, state law and whatever the vote is in the agreement that has you part of it. So it's, for a community like this, it's gonna be more a reference to what you're doing.
Okay.
You wouldn't be making a decision to pull out of the regional school system, and you're not defining that body or anything like
Right,
that.
I just
So
didn't know if it was any more challenging if a town was part of, as opposed to being on their own.
It's gonna make this process a little easier, cause you're not
Okay,
gonna spend a
well,
lot of
that's
time.
good to know.
I got
Yeah.
a piggyback question. In that section, would you define the roles and responsibilities of Rutland's school committee members? Would that be part of that? Have you seen that in a regional before?
No, in that section, I mean, I'll look back more closely, but in that section generally, the rights and responsibilities of Rutland are defined under your agreement, under your regional school system. So when we draft a charter for communities that are part of a regional school system, we touch that as little as possible.
Just referring to it more than
Exactly.
trying to change
You make a
anything.
reference to it in the charter, and that's it.
Only reason I asked that is because the school committee members are elected within the town of Rutland. That's the reason why I was curious about that section associated with those members. So-
Yeah, so you might reference, we've got 3 elected.
That's the
don't have
details. I don't wanna
language
get into the
up-
weeds.
yeah.
I don't wanna get into the
But-
weeds, yeah.
Yeah, but you're not really gonna lay out anything about their terms or anything like that. You're gonna
Okay.
refer to the law and the agreement that exists.
Okay, great, thanks.
Anything else?
Are you looking for a motion to adjourn?
I guess yes, I'll take that as a motion. Do I have a second?
Motion to
I will
adjourn?
second it.
We have a second, all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Hearing none. We close the meeting. It's unanimous. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Pleasure meeting you, Attorney.
Thank you.
Harry, thanks for the public input. We appreciate it. Keep it up. Bring your friends next week, all right, in a couple weeks. And see you then. Thank you, folks.
And I'll see you in the